Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this month's Highways, Transport and Waste and Overview Scrutiny Committee. When I was a young man, I was always told to ask before taking one's jacket off. I'm sorry, I've taken my jacket off already. I hope that's okay with everyone. I do find it a little warm in here at times. Okay, so as usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. Not that I think that we've got many people watching. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website. I would ask you to turn your phones off or onto silent, please. And may I welcome Mrs. Seaton onto the committee to replace Mr. Smith. Okay, before we begin, may I remind everyone only to turn their microphones on when you wish or invited to speak, and then turn them off afterwards. I also turn the speaker off on my laptop in case it beeps and burps, but that's my personal thing. Okay, firstly, the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of November. These have been circulated, I presume read, and can they be confirmed? Yep. Any to the contrary? Jolly good, thank you very much. And I've received a question from Mr. Richard Anderson, a member of the public, in relation to a bus service that was removed from Thornton. And the response has been published on the council's website and sent to members of the committee. In accordance with normal procedures, I can remind members that there is no discussion on the question raised and the response provided, and that this question and answer will be taken as read. Mr. Anderson has made no indication that he wished to come back, so we'll move straight on to questions asked by members understanding orders 7.3 and 7.5. No such questions have been received. There are no urgent items under agenda item 4. Next, we move to declarations of interest. Do any members have any interests they wish to declare?
Yeah. Hello, I've another registered interest. I've been told that the item in which I have an interest in and why, you can confirm that I've taken advice from the monitoring office, and you've been advised this will not affect you taking part in the debate at the meeting. This then can be properly recorded in the minutes. If you have any further queries, let me know.
Can I just confirm that's for the MTFS item?
Yes, that's for the MTFS item.
Okay.
Yep, but that does allow you still to join into the conversation. And Mr. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the same as Mr. McDonald, other registrable interest in item 8 as a trustee of Syston Volunteer Centre, which deals with passenger transport. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I would.
Yes, I've been advised the same as Mr. McDonald that I can take part and will not need to leave the room. Thank you.
Yes, that's yes, good. And I was in the volunteer sector of transport myself for many years. Very good cause. Okay, any declarations of the party whip? Okay, I've received no petitions. Moving on to our first main substantive item for the agenda today, the medium-term financial strategy for 2026-27 to 2029-30 on pages 7 to 34 of your pack. Can I welcome to the meeting the lead member of the Cabinet, Mr. Tilbury, and the Director and Carruthers and Assistant Directors, Anne Walker, Pat Clark, and Susan Baum. Susan Baum is the Strategic Financial Manager. And it's Jana Walker. I do beg your pardon. Okay, so the structure for considering the report is set out in separate sheets. which I will first invite the director and lead member to introduce, and we will stop at nearly each area and ask for questions at the end of each topic, if that makes life easier. Okay, so over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just before I get into it, can I just advise, I've also got Assistant Director Jo Gill with us, and she covers the waste side, just to make sure we can definitely answer your questions today across the remit. Because as you know, this report in terms of the MTFS pertains to the Highways, Transport and Waste Services that sit within the Environment and Transport Department. You'll know as members, I'm sure this isn't news to you, it's set within a context of, across the council, 23 million budget gap for next financial year, 26-27, rising to 106 million over the 4-year period. So that's the context of which we're speaking about these services within environment and transport. So if I move you to the first section, which just a reminder, we're looking at the revenue budget and just the overall revenue position for the department. The revenue budget for 26-27 is 119 million. You'll see that in Table 1 under paragraph 6 of your report. And Table 2 gives a breakdown about how that is aligned across our main service areas. Just to emphasise, however, that's a net position. The gross expenditure of the department will be 148 million because we do have various income contributions from grants, etc. That totals 29 million. Table 2 gives that breakdown of the bigger spend areas across the department, and just really high level to, sorry, I'm not quite on the right page there. To pick some of those out there. Development and growth, that's Jana Walker's area there. You'll see there's a reasonable amount of spend. When it comes on to transport, highways and transport operation, that's Pat's area there. The big areas, the highway maintenance, the highway direct operations, as you can imagine, but that 44 million assisted transport service, that's our school and SEN transport. So you can see what a sizable element of our overall budget that takes. Then if you move on to the waste management, which is Jo Gill's area there, you can see again it's a sizable element there, 33 million. That's our waste disposal costs across the county. So again, a real big chunk within the budget there to give you that flavour of where the money gets spent, in our services. You'll see just under paragraph 9 there, there's various budget transfers and adjustments. If I'm absolutely frank, I'll leave that to my financial colleagues, the likes of Susan Bowen there. And as you'll see, they're fairly minor numbers, but it's just about keeping the accountancy right, so things go into the right budget lines, etc. But, if you have any further questions on that, please let us know. I will stop there, Chair, because that's the high-level overview of the revenue budget, and then I'll go into more detail about the growth and savings across our services. Thank you.
Jolly good, thank you. And are there any questions? Right, Mr. Lovegrove and then Mr. Buxton, Dr. Buxton, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Some of this might just move from my information and just clarification. But some of the elements it's in the growth, isn't it? One of them is the loss of income on passenger. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about under Appendix B, reference G20. The loss of income on passenger fleet from the removal of school fund service. So just a bit of an explanation on that, please. Thank you.
I can come in, and if there's more detail, I'm sure Pat will help. It's you'll be aware the council's withdrawing from its school food service from April this year. Sorry, we're in 2026 now, aren't we? So as part of our service, the school transport, as you know, we've got partly our own fleet. And we also go out to the market for school transport as well. But, with our own fleet, we provide journeys first thing in the morning and obviously at the end of the school day. The middle of the day, those vehicles are available. And what we have been doing is delivering food to schools for the school food service. We got paid an income for that. This reflects the income we are losing because the authority is no longer providing that school food service.
And that's the reason it's the same through the whole budget, right up to 29-30. Yep.
That's at the moment that is built into our base budget, so we have to remove it from our base budget, and that reflects across each year of the MTFS.
Dr. Broxham.
Thanks, Anne. Just a quick point of clarification. I'm sure this is standard every year, and I'm just not getting it. But on point 7, it says detailed service budgets have been compiled based on no pay or price inflation. That seems odd to me. Is that just some accountancy thing? Could you just explain that, please?
I think you're absolutely right. It's some accountancy thing. No, the way LCC deals with it is departments do it on that basis, but there is a pot held centrally that then deals with that inflation, because obviously it reacts to what inflation is in year, etc. So we absolutely understand that that will happen. There will be inflation on pay, etc. But that's managed corporately for the department. So it's just not reflected in our department budget, but it's accounted for corporately. Sorry if
And does that pot change every year? Or do you actually make assumptions of inflation being
I'll
at
leave
X
that.
point?
I'll
and
hand to
actually
Susan if I
look at
can
the
on that.
common things?
Hi, yes, we budget based on the current prices, and then in year we put bids towards the inflationary uplift. So we base it on actual. So all the bids are then evidence based. So we don't actually put the inflation in because you don't know what that inflation is going to be. And that's just during the year. And then we get the money from the central contingency, for which the provision is made over the whole of the authority based on certain estimates.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, Mr. Lovegrove.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, for clarification, I'm not an accountant, so I don't know why, but in the, again, Appendix B, and the reference is G19, it's talking about growth, but the figures are negative amounts all the way through, and it's exactly the same each year. I'd have thought in my head that would have been in the savings element and not a negative in the growth area. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Don't mind me taking that one, Chair. So the reason that is a negative in the growth area is last year, so for the financial year 25-26, we were given a rather large growth allocation to support street lighting maintenance costs. That included a one-off growth requirement of 125,000. So this is simply the reimbursement or the return of that 125,000 from out of our budgets.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I'll refer back to Anne to continue.
Thank you very much. And I'll move on to the growth section. So that was a nice segue in. Thank you very much. It starts at paragraph 15 in the report for you. Just a reminder, growth is what we refer to as the amount of funding we need over and above our existing budget to deliver the same service next year, or over the next few years, etc. So in order to deliver what we're delivering, actually, we need this additional money, etc. That's what the growth is. For highways, transport and waste over the MTFS period, a summary of that growth is shown in table 3 for you. And you'll see that the overall growth amounts to 5.11 million in the first year, 26-27, but rises significantly in later years. The key things driving those increases are the demand for special education needs transport, SEN transport side of that. As you see, that goes from 4.9 million to over 13 million at the end of the 4-year period. That itself is driven by a number of factors. One, increasing numbers of pupils that we're actually transporting because the number of EHCPs are increasing, and it's roughly half of EHCPs require transport. So it's not everybody with an EHCP, roughly half those numbers coming through we find require transport, but those numbers are continuing to increase. We've got increasing complexity. So for instance, if a child needs a medical expert, medical escort or solo transport, obviously that, increases cost, as well as the distance we're carrying to settings. Often, the setting we're taking them to, there aren't places close to their home location. So we're having to pay for that distance, etc. So, ongoing real challenges there in terms of that growth, as you can see. When you come to the savings element, though, sorry, a bit of a spoiler, we are doing significant work to reduce that level of increase there. So I'll come on to the bit to tell you what we're doing to try and control those costs more, given those circumstances of increasing numbers, etc., etc. The next largest growth item you can see on the highways and transport side is the mainstream school transport. Again, increasing numbers there, and also increasing element of taxi transport due to school placement challenges. If you need a school's full, we're maybe having to transport you further, but you know, chances are there's only a few pupils we have to do that to, so you're not putting them on a bus and getting efficiencies of scale there, but actually you may be putting on much smaller scale, more expensive transport to meet those needs or that travel requirement. You can see there the removal of growth on fleet vehicle maintenance is down. Sorry, that's down to the cycle of new investment in vehicles. Obviously, newer vehicles need less maintenance, so we track that through an investment program so that we're making sure that we're keeping that maintenance requirement down, and that's a benefit there at that time because it reduces the burden on the service and obviously the cost. You've already alluded to the removal of growth on the street lighting maintenance. That was a one-off, as Susan had said, for specific structural testing of columns. We've done that, so that is being taken off. It's not an ongoing requirement in our budget. And then on the waste side of things, if we move down to that, you can see that the biggest growth element there is emissions trading scheme. This is a new government mandate. It's basically a cap and trade system on greenhouse gas emissions from energy from waste facilities, you know, where we put our waste a good chunk of our waste disposal into. And the figures quoted are our best current estimates of what this might mean for the county council. Now, obviously, as more information becomes available, and you know, it's linked into things like the cost of carbon per tonne that changes every year. The markets are volatile. It's a new emerging market. It's an immature market in the UK compared to Europe, etc. You know, as we get more information, we'll refine that as we move forward. But as you can see, it's a substantial additional cost the county council has to meet because of national legislation coming in. We can't avoid it. We're going to have to pay it, whatever that sum is. But we will refine that number as we go forward. Similarly, the deposit return scheme, that's a new requirement under the government legislation with all the waste changes, and you've heard papers on that in this committee before. That comes into operation in April 2027. And the impact for us is less income from recyclates. Hence, you know, so we're getting less income from that stream at the moment that we get. Hence, that is a growth item. We'll need to, you know, cover that. There's also growth arising from more waste tonnages for us to dispose of. You know, we've got a growing population, etc. And the loss of income from DIY waste is something previously we could charge for, or we did charge for at our RHWS sites. We're no longer able to do that under legislation. Okay, so we have to plug that gap literally. I'll move on to the savings then, and as you'll see there in the savings, we've got 5.6 million will be delivered in 26-27, and that increases to 6.9 million by the end of the MTFS. The biggest savings arise from the assisted transport programme. That's the SEN transport and school transport that I mentioned before. We've had a programme of work in place. Well, Pat's had a programme of work in place over the last few years, and and it's continuing over the next few years. And there's various different work streams under that to control those costs, so those rising costs. The things include route optimization, demand management, how we're procuring with the market, reprocuring mid-year, reviewing those contracts, etc. There's a whole host of different work streams there. And as you can see, they are paying dividends, you know, the amount of savings, over 4 million coming through that programme. And trying to control the costs. But I'll just remind you, remember, by the end of the MTFS period, in terms of growth, we are anticipating we'd need another 13 million to cover our costs in this service. So while it certainly is helping, we are still got a net growth position on that service there. Network management is linked to income generation and implying that, ensuring we're implying the legislation consistently and taking every opportunity we can. We're forecasting a saving of 800,000 through contract procurement efficiencies, and that's predominantly how we commission our public transport services across the county. And on the waste side of things, the largest saving comes from food waste implementation. You're aware under legislation that's coming into play legally from this April, but it will be rolled in depending on where districts in terms of collection authorities are, how ready they are to do that. But legally it comes in from this April. And the saving for us comes through the reduction in residual waste disposal costs and then the rising income from recyclates. We've also got that there as a saving, and also rising income from our trade waste service that we offer through a couple of our sites. That's the savings. Now, they're the ones that are already in the MTFS. We're confident we can deliver them. We're on with delivering them, etc. And we've got our estimated forecast saving figures in there. We've then got a category, if I just move you on to savings under development. There's things that we as a department are working on, but they're not quite at the stage that we're yet confident in A, we can definitely deliver them, and B, the amount of money we'll get out of them. So there are things we're working on at the moment that they're kind of the next generation savings that you will see. So just to give you an idea about what they are, it includes a review of our post-16 SEN transport. Legislation around that changes after the mandatory school age, post-16 legislation changes, and there's, and again, it changes at 19. So we're talking about that post-16 element there. And that particularly refers to, we're looking at voluntary personal travel budgets and how we can increase those, because if we get an uptake of those, their average cost is less than the average cost of providing door-to-door transport for those particular people. So we're looking at how we can expand that element of our transport offer. We're also looking at fleet efficiencies through things like minimising vehicle hires, how we can do that, because every so often in delivering our services, if vehicles are out the game, we have to hire them in, etc. How do we minimise that requirement and keep those costs down? And reviewing our maintenance and replacement schedules on our vehicle fleet. Just a reminder, we manage the whole council's vehicle fleet. There's about 350, 400 vehicles we manage. For the vast majority sit within the Environment and Transport Department, but some other departments have vehicles as well. We manage all those. Moving on, we've got a network management initiative there, and that's a full-scale review of our process to how we manage roadworks out there through our permitting scheme that we've got. And there's a whole host of work there. Again, it's about ensuring efficiency of our process, maximising when there's penalties and income, that kind of thing. So we're going through all that and setting that up and restructuring the team to drive that forward. And that needs to be in place before we can consider the option of implementing something called a lane rental scheme. A lane rental scheme is something that was trialled in Kent by government a few years ago, and it really is about taking the permitting scheme to the next stage. And in essence, you allocate a very small percentage of your network, something like 5%, your really busy roads. And on those roads, if there is a developer, a utility, or ourselves working on it, there's a fairly high charging schedule per day. The objective is to make sure those working on the road are there for the minimum time and causing least disruption on those busiest routes. However, there's an awful lot of requirements in terms of putting something like that in place. So we need to do the network management work on our permitting scheme before we consider that option. But it's something we consider beyond that. Certainly worth a look at. We're also looking at what we can do to commercialise our highway services where there's opportunities in that, where we can drive income. And the same with our RHWS on the waste side. We're looking at how we can, where else can we drive up income and service efficiency proposals. Forestry, just to give you a bit of variety, we're also looking at the forestry service and the end-to-end service. At the moment, the way we're set up, some of that sits within corporate resources, just historic various reasons, and some sits within the environment and transport. And we're looking at bringing that together to try and drive efficiencies and see what we can drive out of that. And finally, we have, under the subs category, we have on-street parking charges. We do not, we manage the on-street parking because we are the highway authority. The districts manage any off-street parking that they have, that's their responsibility. We do not charge anywhere on street in the county, and this would be looking at a potential option of implementing charges there. Lots of work to be done on that, very early stages, but it's one we can look at. And also an alternative funding model for school crossing patrols is something we're looking at. That's a discretionary service. I know it's very valued, but it's a discretionary service, and we're looking at if we could fund that in different ways. But just to stress, all those ones I've just talked about need further work. Some may drop out because we think they're unfeasible, there won't be any money or efficiencies in them, etc. But we will bring them through the appropriate processes as they progress. Okay, just a couple of areas I'll whiz through before I stop. The efficiency review and financial sustainability. You'll be more than aware that the council's carrying out an efficiency review. We have an external consultancy in working with us, looking across the council at where else we can make savings, drive efficiencies, and derive income, generate income because of the extent of the budget gap that you are well aware of. That's Newton, they're in doing that. A summary of the scope of the review is outlined in paragraph 25 of your report. Initial findings for implementation for the coming year's MTFS include things like acceleration of adults' social care reablement initiatives. So there's a few things that have been, as quick wins, been identified of that, which will go into the 26-27 MTFS. And beyond that, we have a programme of work. Every department is working with Newton to look in more detail at what else can be brought forward for the remaining period of the MTFS. So there is a fairly full-on comprehensive package of work that's going on to bring out find other opportunities for the authority. For our areas, we're looking at things like independent travel training as part of our offer for SEN transport. We're looking at fees and charges maximisation if we're missing anything there, procurement improvements, and place-based service efficiency as well. I think I am getting on to just about the last one for you before you have a break. Other things, there's quite a long section there about things that influences our ability to or managing our costs across our service area, external things that we don't necessarily have control over, but we have to react to. An example on the highways and transport side is Department for Transport have recently announced 4-year funding for transport in consolidated funding. This is something that all highway authorities and authorities up and down the country have been asking for a long time, because the way it's previously worked, or until this financial year's work, we get a 1-year funding allocation for all our kind of highways maintenance, and then various different funding streams for buses and active travel, etc. And in terms of planning and procurement, it's very inefficient, because you can't procure contracts for 4 or 5 years and get real efficiencies because you do not have the certainty of your funding. So this is really good news. So we are looking at that. We're planning our future programmes. It's new for all authorities, so we are adapting and moving forward on that. So hopefully we can drive more efficiency through that, because we've got better certainty of funding, and we can drive those that effective procurement, etc. The announcements we got also represent increased capital investment of 43 million over 4 years for us. So that's really, really good news. So we'll always say more to money, but all I'm saying again, across the highways and transport side, it won't be the answer to everything. I'm sure you're well aware, in terms of the roads, highway infrastructure, transport, there's loads more we can do if we had the funding. This will help. It will not address everything your constituents all want to do. So just to temper that, it's really good news, but it's just part of the story, really. It's part of the journey, hopefully. And it will help us address some of our maintenance backlog, but again, it will not be the answer to absolutely everything in getting the roads to the absolute condition we would all want to see them in. What else will I just pick out for you there? That consolidated funding it brings the requirement we have to publish a transport delivery plan. What are we doing with this money? And we have to publish the first draft of that 20th of March, and then we have to do a kind of more a final version of that by September. We will bring those through all the appropriate processes. Okay. It's also got a performance rating system across it. And in future years, not this year coming, but in future years, it will impact the amount of money you get. If you're not performing well, potentially you will get less money. Okay, so, you know, really, we have to take this very seriously and make sure we are performing well to max out that grant allocation. There's many other factors that influence, you know, our services and the cost of those: growing population, changes in legislation, like the waste sector, seeing massive changes are costing us, etc. More severe weather from the changing climate, you know, we're having to react to that, certainly costing lots more across our highway services, and the ability to recruit and to retain staff in the skills we need to deliver these services. I think I'll stop there and give you a wee break for questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, a wee break so you can take a breath. Mr. Tilbury, I regret I didn't ask you if you had any comments previously. Would you like to interject at the moment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of comments. I mean, obviously, we've got some really big budget challenges ahead, many of which are statutory. It'd be interesting to see what elected members think of parking charges, because I'm sitting on the fence myself, as I knows on that one. My question to either Anne or Jana is, how much extra funding would we need to get the roads up to a standard, ideally, that we'd like it to be? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that question. We get off asked that, you know, I have been asked that over the years a lot, and it's not an exact science. However, we did do a piece of work a couple of years ago that put it in the vicinity of kind of 200 to 230 million we would need at that point to address our backlog. So if you take that over 10 years, it's like, you know, 20 million a year, isn't it, you know, kind of thing. However, the criteria of how you measure your condition of the road has changed. So we're going through the process of evaluating that condition of road, and that then will churn out a kind of more up-to-date and hopefully accurate estimate of where we are, given what government wants us to, how government wants us to report on the condition of our road. But, you know, as I say, you know, maybe that 20 million a year over what we've got, you know, and traditionally, for instance, this year we've got, is it about 28 million we got from government, or sorry, next year we've got 28 million capital allocation. So you're nearly doubling the allocation you get in terms of capital, just to give you an idea. So it's not just give us a million or two or we can fix it. You know, you are talking substantive, you know, step changes in terms of that increase that would be needed to address that.
Jolly good. Two comments that I would make. One is going back to the parking. I think that enforcing the existing charges would be better than bringing in new ones, but I understand that has other problems. When you're talking about the maintenance of the vehicles, and you said that there are efficiencies in there and a lower cost because it's been done better, did you take into account the savings that would be because of the amount of mileage that would be saved because you weren't doing the school dinner runs?
Thank you for that question. As far as we have modelled that, but the big efficiency saving comes is last year we bought some new minibuses, and those minibuses, the old minibuses, were getting beyond their life, and they were beginning to cost us a lot of money to maintain. So that's where that big efficiency has come in, not so much on what they're doing on an operational basis, but that has been baked into the calculation that you see in the report.
Jolly good. Thank you very much for that. Now, Mr. Cook, followed by Mr. Morris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Is that on? Yeah. Thank you for that. It sounds like we're on the right road and there's more money being thrown at the roads and transport, etc. But my concern is no matter how much money you throw at it, and I know I mentioned this before and I've used sarcastic remark of cone theories. On the way here, I've seen a sign that said this road will be closed till the 1st of December. And it weren't until 2 minutes later I realised that road had opened. 1st of December's gone. On Breedon on the Hill, there's signs that are being put there. I watched a guy put them there and they're still there. There's no work taking place. In fact, if you can imagine, I was going to take photos because I think you said last time, take some photos. I just don't have enough memory in my phone. There's cones everywhere. There's more cones than people, in my opinion, on the edges, thrown in the edges. And these particular signs, the yellow ones that say roads closed, these are actually blown away through the winter. They've been there 6 months. No work has taken place. And I'm sure that most members will understand that there's traffic lights being put up. What I'm asking is, the formality, and again, I go back to the sarcastic remark I made before, saying that back in the day, a man would come, put a couple of cones out, do the work. If it's a pothole, take it away. It seems a formality these days, and there's got to be a cost to this, that a team of people come, the highways controller, whatever, they set the cones up in the lights. That's there. I've seen one on the way here, actually, and that's there, and the works will be taking place in 2 weeks' time. That stays there. Them cones will either get thrown aside or whatever happens. The work then takes place and then they stay there. And I assume this is all to do with risk, or maybe in risk assessments. But my question is, there's that many cones on the pavements or in bushes and signs that have not been taken away. And I go back to the 1st of December. That's been and gone. That sign's still there. There's a lot of money, surely, throughout the county, these signs and cones that have been wasted and left, if not laying down on the grass. So then when the guys are coming from county to cut the grass, these signs on the grass, I mean, they must get fed up with it. Are you getting feedback from them? Because I'm seeing a lot of this, and I thought it was just me, but a lot of residents that do have issues. And that's got to be a big money saving if we looked into the procedure of how we're doing things. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Just a reminder, yes, we're out there doing highway maintenance, but a lot of works are carried out by other people on the highway. We have to facilitate the utility companies, the power, the water, etc., gas, etc. We have to facilitate all them. They're either going in and doing emergency works, repairs, maintenance, that kind of thing. And also developers, when they've got a new, access or whatever into their development and a requirement to make improvements on the existing highways, they are allowed to go in and work as well. So some of the works, are out there by other parties. Now, what we always say, if you see those signs and things like the 1st of December one, please report them. When our inspectors are going around, we're expecting them to pick that up as well. Our own operations, we should be taking them in after they've completed the works. If we're doing, a surfacing, patching job, etc., they should be doing all that. And I'm fairly confident 99% of the time, I look at Pat here, we are doing that, etc. The other ones are, and I think we have had this conversation before, but I'll just remind you, the way the sector works, because we've had a lot of we have regular engagement with all the utility operators that work in our network, but we've had a lot of conversations recently, particularly with Severn Trent Water. Now, the way they've gone over the years, because, it's all about efficiency, isn't it? It's about the bottom line, is no longer do you get one lot that come along, do all your traffic management, do the works, replace the gas main or whatever, close it all in, restate it, and then take away the traffic management. What they do is they commission a traffic management company. So the likes of Severn Trent might have a contract with a traffic management company all over the Severn Trent area, and they have to come in on A50, in Leicestershire, and go and do it on this day. They'll do that. Then they'll have a contract with whoever is their excavator to go in and dig up the road so they can get the gas main. So they'll go in the next day and dig it up, because the traffic management coming out the day before. Then they'll have their gas people who'll go and do the mains, however long they're there to fix the mains. Then it'll be the case of, you get my drift, aren't you? Then it'll be the case of, they're finished with that, call up the reinstatement company to get them in. Oh, we've done it. Oh, it's taken us a bit longer. Traffic management company's lost its date. It can't come into another 3 days later. And then the one at the end is the one that leaves the signs of the cones, etc. So what we do when we get notified, we'll ring Severn Trent and say, your stuff's still out there, come and get it taken in. I don't have the resource to go around and take everybody's signing in. We do have a role, and Pat's team have a role of making the right people responsible for that and picking up the cost, not us to pick up the cost. So absolutely hear what you're saying. It's a frustration for everybody. But our job is to make sure those responsible for those works are taking out the necessary action, because we cannot afford to pick up those costs and that resource.
Chair, if I may, can I come back on that, please? I understand your frustration. I know this conversation we've had deeply, and as it's my division and grass grows over the signs when they're laying down, it's us that are picking up the repairs for these machines. So as much as I appreciate and I see your frustration, the system's not working. I understand there's A, B and C. No one's talking and there seems to be no worries about the cones and the signs that have been left there. And you're quite right. And I'm sure you are chasing them up. But the bottom line is when them machines run over them, and I've seen this at the parish council last week, and I see it all the time. Even my machines, they're running over these things that you can't see them because the grass starts to grow. Then that just come back to us. So, and I appreciate you're reminding them. You're giving them that phone call saying that they're not taking away the stuff, but I'm just reminding you that there is a lot out there. It's been out there 6 months. So thank you for that reply anyway.
Okay, Mr. Morris, please.
There's a lot of new technology with the road repairs, new materials, new equipment for putting it down. Are we comparing our prices with other councils as we can find out which is the best way just by getting price per meter or something simple as that with the new technologies?
Can I pick up that answer? Yes, we're constantly looking at our costs and we are benchmarking our costs against all other highway authorities. Some technology that is out there it's still got to be developed before we bring it to a road in Leicestershire. I was at a conference last Tuesday on behalf of Adam down at Parliament to look at some new technology on that. And really and truthfully, it may be the future, but there's a little while we've got before that future comes. The key in what we're constantly doing is we're looking at what other people are doing. We're looking at what manufacturers are coming out with and seeing what it would look like here in Leicestershire. In Leicestershire, we are very, very fortunate that we have some quarries on our doorstep, which means that you've got hot material constantly being used for your pothole filling and the like of. That isn't the same when you go to other parts of the country. So we're really, really fortunate. But hot material and the way we currently do our repairs is deemed to be one of the better ways of doing it. We also look at, benchmarking, as I've said, but we're also part of groups, national groups, looking at this type of stuff, with industry.
I just say there's new road surfacing that uses rubber, reused rubber, and they virtually last forever. And that's you won't need to do potholes if you start getting onto that level.
So just coming back on that, I mean, we done a trial. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago now at Blaby, and we're constantly looking at that with regard. It was the Blaby bypass, and some of the material that was used there was rubber crumb. Yeah. But we are constantly looking at how that's performing. In certain areas, it's doing okay. In other areas, it has got concerns. But again, you can't automatically blame the material because it might be drainage. It might have had an incident on it that has affected that mat. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Lovegrove, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'll have a bit of a rant. We're here to examine and study the financial strategy up to 2030, not look at practical day-to-day gripes about what's happening in different divisions across the county. I think it's a fantastic report, and there's a lot of good information here, packed with information. So I'll come now to ask some questions and comments about the financial strategy. Just one thing on the potholes. Potholes will be with us forever, and it's an easy target to aim for to try and get political headlines. Anne's explained it in great detail in the past. The potholes are not what Anne wants, where the road surface has degraded to a point where it needs resurfacing. That's the ideal aim, isn't it? That's what the goal is. And potholing is almost a second best measure. This time of the year, particularly when it's wet and frosty, is when the roads degrade the most. And one of the comments in here, one of the points you were talking about of charging developers for the time they're using the road network near where they are, that adds to the road damage as well. If anybody goes to any construction site where there's been houses being built, they'll see the number of potholes go up. So it is a real challenge and will always be a challenge. More on the financial side, I think it should be a real concern to this committee about the increase in special educational needs transport and the mainstream school transport. they are horrendous figures that we're going to have to take on board and carefully scrutinise. There's nothing we can do about them, but to go from 5 million to 13 million is just horrendous. And I was looking on my computer very quickly because at the last council meeting, the council submitted a question to government and we've had a reply back, but I couldn't find the reply. I didn't know whether there might be some support coming down the line, hopefully, maybe from central government, because Leicestershire being the lowest funded in the country, these sort of figures start to take finances away from other key services, and we need to really watch that with a focused vision. Some other things to mention, that's just for a comment. Some other quick things as well. Done that one. Several things being investigated. Thank you for outlining some of the things that are being investigated for getting extra savings. One of the ones you didn't touch on was the Network Management Improvement Project. I don't think you touched on that. If you could just explain a bit more about that, please, Anne. Done the road ones. Under 23, future financial sustainability. In under 23, it says a step change in approach is required. That sounds quite dramatic in a report from how an area of work is currently being rolled out at county council, where we might be looking at a step change and what might be in that step change. Well, that might be Newton, I don't know. And then I think there was just one other thing. Got two things. One is the PCNs, the traffic wardens. And I know that's a challenge in some parts of the county because they're not always fully filled, those places. And some people know in Market Harborough, the traffic warden only goes on Thursday morning. And so the rest of the week, people park where they want. And I know they're almost self-financing, aren't they? So the fines that they get from double yellows goes to pay for those people, whether that's something we can look at in the future, because it is anecdotal now that people know when the traffic wardens are there and then just ignore the rest of the time. Then my last point was on timing. Joanne will know that I was involved in the committee on the looking at the county tips, and it's great to see that the new Melton tip is in the capital programme in the future. No details yet, but whether there's an approximate timescale when that might be on the cards. Thank you. An excellent report, Anne. Thank you.
If you're all right through you, Chair, thank you very much. And sorry, I can just acknowledge my colleagues here. Susan did loads of work in this report, so I can't really take the credit for it. But, you know, it was a team effort, we'll put it like that. But I must acknowledge Susan in that if I can. If I have a go at some of them, and I'll hand to colleagues for some of your other points. Firstly, potholes, absolutely. Would you like to come and work with us? You know, yeah, as a kind of maintenance engineer. But, you know, the whole overall premise is we want to be doing far more things like surface dressing, because you want to get a road before it deteriorates so much it's got potholes all over it, because when you're doing that there's potholes all over it. You know, it's not ideal just doing an individual pothole, and eventually it'll get to the stage you've got to massively reconstruct that road, which is really expensive. If we get in there early enough, you know, you can elongate that life by, you know, 7 to 10 years, etc., with a fair wind and not too bad weather, etc. So we want to do more of a preventative. However, and we've discussed this in national forums, I've discussed it with government. How do we get away from the fixation of potholes? Because it's not the cure. You're not preventing it, you know. But we're fixated with them. We need to get people excited by surface dressing, preventative treatment. You know, that's what we want to see more of. But unfortunately, we can't seem to get out of this pothole thing. But you're absolutely right. We need to, and that's what we'll be trying to do with this additional money, get more into the preventative works so you get less defects, less potholes appearing. You mentioned the SEN transport. I just wanted to pick up on the national position. We're very active on the national forum. I started up a few years ago with my ADEPT hat on, which is the Association of Directors of What We Do Place, a joint working group with the Association of Directors of Children, specifically on SEN transport, because it's a national issue for all authorities, costs going like that. And we've got DFE on that, Department for Education, because they're the ones that hold the legislation around it. etc. And we produced a guidance toolkit to help all local authorities. What can you do to help manage down your costs? The type of thing that Pat's team are really doing with a vengeance. And we had a clear ask of government. Since then, there's been a government change. I'm no longer on that group. I handed it over to other people, but Pat's team are, and it's still going on, and it's got really good engagement with DFE. We're not yet saying there are promises of changes to legislation, some smaller things, but equally, I'd say there's a really proactive, collegiate kind of national conversation happening around in recognition of these severe challenges we've got around SEN transport. Okay. I'm going to hand network management to Pat in a minute. In terms of your thing about the step change in paragraph 23, I think that's to acknowledge, sorry, it's not hugely explicit, is it, that paragraph, but it's kind of acknowledge, we've been doing this for 15 years. Okay, when was it? 2008-9, that initial, hit was it the subprime market in America? And then we all had a global recession, etc. Local authorities have been taking money out their services for 15 years. We're still providing the same services. We haven't stopped any. But for instance, for our department, I can't really remember I think the dates were 2009-10. I've taken 28 million, not me personally, but collectively, and I wasn't even here then, but 28 million out of services. So that revenue budget of 119 million, 120 million, that would be 115 million today if we hadn't done that. Sorry, 150 million today just to provide the same services. And in many areas, the demand for our services going up, SEN transport, school transport, highways, maintenance work, all the demand for our services going up, and we are doing it with 30 million less. But we can't go around the same hoops again, taking more money out without reducing the service. So that's where that's coming from. We can't magic up again. We need to think differently. And part of that's the reason for the Newton efficiency review. What more could we do? How can we operate differently? Because if members still want us to deliver these services, because many of the E&T services are discretionary, they're not statutory. If you still want us to deliver them, we need the funding. But actually, how are we making that budget balance? It needs a kind of rethink, because we're not new at it. There isn't any low-hanging fruit. We're talking about difficult things, car parking charges, a prime example, etc. So I think that's what that's referring to. CEOs, I'll have a shot, but Jana might want to come in depending on how I go on this. You're absolutely right. It's a kind of self-financing model. We have a partnership with the districts because under two-tier, we work with the districts on this, and how it works is we have the notice processing unit. So if anybody gets a parking ticket, it's processed through the county council activity. We've got a team of people doing that, and we do the residents' parking permits, etc. The district councils manage the CEOs, civil enforcement officers, basically your parking wardens, etc. They manage them. We do it collaboratively, and it's a self-sustaining funding model there. Your point though about people get to know, and I know Mr. Piper Chair, you mentioned earlier about more enforcement of the existing restrictions. We haven't got charges, but we have got restrictions, time limited, double yellow lines, all the rest of it. People, your point there about people know when the parking warden comes. They are quite a responsive service where the enforcement officers go. But what they do know is they know when the peak times are within those communities of when there's issues, because when those infringements are most likely to happen, and i.e. the reason they go is actually when people are parking all over, you're causing traffic chaos in the area, etc., etc. It's about managing that down. So they will go if they know it's a Tuesday afternoon in Market Harbour or a Thursday in Charnwood when the market's on. They will go then because that's when these problems will arise and they need to be there. However, the service is responsive, and I know because I get them in at times. We've got an issue and wherever, and I get onto the right people, and they'll speak to their colleagues in the districts. Could you go out at a certain time to this place, because we know that we've had reported issues, so they will respond to that as well. So it's getting a balance there around how we manage that, because we need them to go where there's problems and they can help alleviate that, rather than to communities where actually there's no parking infringements and it's not really productive time in terms of ensuring we're keeping the roads moving as they're meant to. And yeah, there is, we do have challenges, and I think it was Mr. Piper referred to it in that, in terms of recruitment and retention, as well, resourcing is difficult in that area. And I think the other one, so I'm going to hand to Pat on the network management initiative. I think he did cover it, but Pat's probably got more detail. Joel can pick up the Melton element, and Jan, if she wants to add anything about the parking enforcement, if that's all right.
Thanks, Anne. So the network management improvement project, it goes in line really with what we've already been talking about with regard to utilities. We're fully aware in Leicestershire that the number of utilities opening holes and closing holes has gone up tenfold. So what we need to do is make sure we're using technology as best we possibly can to understand what the utilities are doing, when they're doing it, and when they're closing it, because it is covered under an act. There is strict guidance around what we can fine them or levy to them, and what we want to do is really optimise that in what's going forward. The other side to the project is also we offer a lot of consultation to individuals that want to close roads, open roads, developers, and people like that. And what we want to start doing is seeing if we can start charging for that, because it's officer time that needs to go into that. There is a quid pro quo in all of this. We get good out of it because the event gets organised properly and we understand it, but it does cost an awful lot of money for us as a unit. So what we're looking at is all of those type of things to make it better going forward. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bradshaw.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I do beg your pardon.
Sorry, did you just want me to come back on Melton? So I'm telling you what you already know, but we can't operationally, strategically not have a really functioning RHWS in the Melton area because of the population density. So we know that there already is the Melton site, but since it was built many moons ago in lovely farmland with lovely views, it's now not that anymore. It's very heavily developed around it, and the access road is really difficult. So it will absolutely function, but there is a recognition that potentially longer term, we're stacking up a problem that's not necessarily of our own making. It's just that development has happened around the site over a period of decades. It's deliberately in the future developments, which for me means it's just at its very early stages. So we're just being really transparent that within the service, there's a recognition that we need to look at the problems in that part of the county. We need that strategic asset. Longer term, we think it's going to get worse, not better. But we're also realistic that we'll need to do a full costed business case to look at whether there are opportunities with land that we have earmarked for other opportunities in that part of the county, and decide what the cost implications are, because obviously I'm very mindful that, it's not a bottomless pot of money in terms of capital. What I can tell you is the last major site that we redeveloped was Kibworth, and that cost us £6 million. So they're not small investments that need to be made. So with inflation and extra cost pressures, you're looking potentially upwards of that, and that's without a land purchase if we needed one. So we would absolutely do all that work, but we're just putting a really clear and transparent marker down that we think it's something that the authority needs to do the work on and then take a judgment.
Thank you, Joe. I think it was when we were on our committee that we came up with a plan of going forward for the county. It was just an idea, with Melton having the new ring road, there's sometimes pockets of land which have been cut off or are available because of the ring road coming in, and there's an opportunity there. So I just thought I'd mention it. But thank you very much for the answer, and thank you again, everybody.
Mr. Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who used to work in packaging, I'm quite interested in G24, which is the deposit return scheme. Is there an indication of what percentage of the cost of single-use bottle the deposit would be, and where would the consumer return it to? Because I can see if it's a bit of a faff to return the bottles, would people actually bother to do it? That's the thing, really.
A blank, but I've got a weird feeling it was about 40 pence. But I will double check. We did bring a report, and it is in the report, and I'm having one of those weeks where I can't remember. I'm going with 40p. But it is that marker to incentivise. Ultimately, the consumer is paying that as part of the point of purchase of that bottle. And it's about whether they're minded to hang on to that empty container and take it back. But in effect, it will be at those locations that are strategically placed, like that reverse vending machine principle. So if you go to Tesco's and you buy your bottle of water and you go back to buy another one the next day, the ease of opportunity is to put it in the reverse vending machine and get your credit, after which you can then go and take that off the next purchase. So that is the premise of the scheme when it comes in.
It's great. Thank you very much.
I've seen in the press the idea of having a number of machines, albeit for drink cans, outside the supermarkets. So it would make sense then for them to be, but bottles tend to break easier than cans. But that depends on whether they're reused or broken down and recycled. If they're broken down and recycled, then if they break in the machine, it doesn't matter. It helps the job.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, this is where the Director mentioned, there's quite a few new pieces of legislation and they all interact with one another. So actually the ambition is not for glass to go in the reverse vending machines for the health and safety reasons already mentioned, but glass potentially does get picked up through some of the other recycling schemes that the districts introduce. So what they're trying to do, the government are trying to encourage wastes through different waste streams. So you'll have some that potentially benefit through the deposit return scheme, others where the packaging directive is trying to encourage the producers of the packaging to lightweight that packaging or reduce the levels of packaging so that we don't have it in the residual waste. So there's a number of things interacting. The interesting bit will, as it rolls out, will there be any points of conflict where you're actually seeing that different materials are being competed for? So we've had to think about that as well in terms of the materials that we capture and then pass on for treatment. And in some cases, we make money from those materials. So will that money get redirected elsewhere? We've got to plan for that in the budget.
Okay, Dr. Bloxham.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a few questions. The first one was actually about the packaging tax, because it's not listed here. And I was just wondering, are you expecting it not to have much of an impact, or have you just included that within one of the other schemes? Speaking to the waste manager at my district council, he was thinking that plus some of these other things will have a big effect on the amount of waste coming in. So I just wonder if that's included here in sort of the increased waste tonnages. The next question is about the capital programme, section 46. The major and the minor schemes actually, but I guess the major schemes focus on that. The funding goes down quite dramatically every year. And I just wonder, I mean, that to me, when I first read that, looked quite concerning. I just wondered if you're concerned about that, or is that something where, I mean, there's a future developments, but on 58, is that likely to change over time? Does it look like that every year and then funding eventually comes in and you have these major projects, you know, pop up and get included? And then there's a couple of points that follow on from things other people have said. So Peter's point about new technology, I know it's not the focus of this report, but I just wondered maybe we could have a report in future on the stuff you've done and the things you've looked at and why they're not ready yet or why they're inappropriate. Things like the blade bypass, the materials and things. It would be good to get that at a future meeting, if that would be okay. And then finally, I'm a bit concerned about what Pat said about closing roads and charging for it. Seems like a great idea for profit-making organisations, but I'm thinking a lot of road closures are for community events that are non-profit making. I can see that if we start charging to close roads, it's going to endanger quite a few things. I mean, remembrance parades and things like that, they're not bringing any money in. I'm hoping if we do go down that route, we're going to bring it back to this committee and we can have a look at that properly. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to your EPR question. Susan has kindly pointed out where it is in the report because she knows it inside out, but I had seen it. But point 42 in the report, it does refer to what we know for 26-27 financial year. So there's just over 5.8 million that the County Council will receive. There's a payment that in effect is coming from the packaging industry in recognition that under this new legislation, we pick up the costs of managing that packaging. You know, they put it onto the market, but we as the council pick it up in either residual waste or recycling or wherever it ends up. So it is in the report.
But I guess the question, not so much the tax you're getting in, the question was more about the changing of behaviour, that if they're being taxed on this, they're going to be incentivised to use less packaging. So we'll have less tonnage in going into waste. So it should save money that way.
We are absolutely planning in financial terms that money that we receive will go down year on year. So we're recognising that industry doesn't like this payment that they're being levied on them. And they'll have pressure from the consumer not to want to see the goods go up. So the opportunity is to technologically change the packaging. So we've got guarantees about year one, but we will have to look each year and then model what we think comes in. We will do an interesting sort of budgetary thing in terms of the money comes into the council and recognising that it goes to packaging. It will come into the department and then it will go into a central reserve because we've already baked in all of the costs of managing packaging. It's in all of our budget lines already, our residual waste, our recycling. If we then get it wrong or we need to do a balancing that we think we haven't covered the costs of what we're managing, then we would have to go to the centre to see if we've got the differentials right.
I can go next and then I think I'll hand to Pat if that's all right. I'll pick up your point about your majors funding there in the capital. I was going to come on to capital next, but since you've asked it, I'll just do it anyway. This is the capital money that goes into what we call major schemes, the big things like MMDR, Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, you're just about to hear about on this agenda, a bit later on, Zoch Bridge replacement, etc. As an authority, we're not in a position to fund those ourselves, so it's grant funding. So this reflects grant funding we've got. So every so often then government will come out with another funding stream you bid for, and if you're lucky it goes in there. One of the things, and we did have a debate about it, is that it's not in there, is the grant funding we're expecting to come for the A511 scheme. That's because we haven't yet put in the full business case. That's due to go in fairly soon. And when government signs that off, that's when they give you the rest of that grant. So we're expecting 30 something million, so it was 42 million in total, but we got some at the outline stage, but they don't release the majority of that until they tick the box on your full business case. We still to go through that process, so it's not showing up here. That will come in here once we've got that. But equally, there's other things like the government have said they've recognised that we as authorities, it's really difficult for us to fund things like Zoch Bridge replacement, because as I said to you before, we get 28 million odd a year for all our highway maintenance things in capital. Now, I can't take 20 million out of that in a year and replace a bridge, which is the cost of Zoch. I can't do that and still maintain the highways. We can, the street lights, the vegetation, the carriageways, the drainage, etc., couldn't do that. So it's difficult for authorities to do that. And that's one bridge. We've got 700 bridges and then retaining structures as well. So government have said they're setting up a new structures fund. So when they've put the details out of that, no doubt we'll look to bid into that. So if we get money out of that, or there could be other funds. So I would very much expect that to, change over time, because we will pull in whatever capital grant for those big schemes that we can't fund out of the kind of business as usual. We do that whenever we can.
Picking up with your question, thank you for the question. Sorry if I misled you there. We're not looking at, we do charge at the moment for the notice processing, so the legal notices that we have to pay for. We are not looking at charging for any further road closures. It's just any consultation that's required. Now, when you're looking at the small parish councils and the localised road closures, they don't really consult. They don't need any consultation. They know what they're doing. They've done it for years, and so there's no real danger. It's more the developers, it's the big events, it's your downloads of this world that suck a lot of officer time that we want to start looking at. I mean, we do get paid for a certain amount of that from the likes of download, but it's those type of big events that happen in the county that we do need to recharge our officer time for. But it will be a process that we will go through and consult on.
Would that include things like the Leicester Marathon, just out of interest? Where a lot of roads, it starts in the city centre, but it comes out past Watermead, so it does go into the county. So there's quite big roads shut for that. That again is a matured road. Everybody understands. You don't really need to consult on that. We consult on it, but you don't need to advise and help on something like that because they know what they're doing. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Chairman. In paragraph 45, item H, it refers to the bus grants continuing. Obviously, there's been a number of services that were restored or launched recently. In my own area, the LC6 between Hinckley and Colville, and the LC14. And I know there are other services across the county that have been restored. These were generally brought in with the proviso that they were for a year's experimental to see how they got on. Given now there's long-term sort of grant money now here, are we therefore minded that these services will generally be assumed to continue?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I wouldn't want to put a cast iron guarantee on any particular service because I think, again, we would look at the performance, make sure it did what we thought it would want to. But in general, this committee, I think, received a report where we said, look, we're gonna go for it. We're gonna put this network in, but at the moment we've only got 1.5, 2 years of funding, and so we may be in a position where we're withdrawing that sort of almost wholesale. So the confirmation of this money means that we will be able to continue that. Give the new routes time to bed in, grow more patronage, certainly, and also things like the demand responsive as well will remain. So I think generally that is very good news. It wouldn't stop us reviewing the appropriateness of a single route and making decisions on those. But I think in terms of the reassurance you're looking for, that there's not this sort of cliff edge where all the bus services that we've put on get taken back as a whole. Certainly that's not the intention, and actually the funding is given specifically to keep that passenger transport initiative going. And I know a number of communities have really benefited from that, and I think we'll be able to learn. It will give us more time to learn more about where that demand is and shape the services, improve them, tweak them to be even better going forward. So yes, not often I come to you with really good news on that front, is it? But I think that is, really positive in that area. And we look forward to kind of working with communities more on that.
Mrs. Seaton.
Thank you. And this comes with apologies as well, because I've just lost the bit. It didn't recognise me, so it threw me out. So it obviously doesn't know who I am. So I'll try and get away without it. So there was one thing, if you're looking at increasing the daily rates of utility companies to encourage them to dovetail their work a little bit better, to closing it and reopening the road, then couldn't we look at charging for signage that's left, fining them for that sort of thing? And the reason I'm going to support this, I'm a Womble, and my front garden is a collection point for cans, for tin cans for the air ambulance. So as a Womble, each time I go out, probably, I'm not exaggerating, at least 3 signs, big A-frames are thrown into the deep long grass, and I have a scrap man that's well trained, and he'll come and pick them up. If they look a bit mangled because the lawnmower's gone over them, then he'll take them away. But if they don't look mangled, obviously we put them in a place for highways to pick up. I report them and they're still there. So I could take you to the A607 at the moment, and ones I have reported, they are still there. So there does need to be a better and hopefully a profitable way of getting these signs removed, which will be fines. The next one is stress testing. Obviously, when it first came out, the parish council, Thurneston Parish Council, obviously county council's name was mud because it's you that decided to do it, but it's not, it's countrywide, isn't it? The stress testing on these. But when it first came in, the parish has to pay all of this money to get stress tested to put Christmas trees up. Obviously, it's just the people that we know got the blame for it. So you've got to pay money to have yours stress tested, the lighting columns stress tested. So you go out to outside companies to do that. And they're very difficult to find because we had to have 40 done this year. And when we initially had it done, it was for every 5 years. Now I've noticed it's every 2 years now. So the rules have moved on this. So would it not be cost effective if we had our own team? And then you could also stress test parishes as well. So we wouldn't be just trust testing it for the county council's lamp posts to see if they are up to standard. But you'd also get the income from the parish councils, the borough councils that want to put their Christmas trees up or their lighting on it. I just wondered whether that was another revenue, because it was very, very difficult for us. And it's 3 times as expensive as it was 4 years ago. And now we have to have it every 2 years, which seems ludicrous. And that's it. So just comments. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, can I come back on that? Brilliant, thank you. So as far as signs that are left out, please let us know where they are. If they are on our network and they've been put out by a utility and we can find the exact location that it was put out at and the opening notice that they have created to put that out, we can enforce a fine. And we will do that. If it's somebody that we can't trace, that's sometimes a problem. And we don't always know all the roadworks that are going on. So it is complex in what it does, and we will pick them up. The other thing is, if they are Highways England signs or Highways England contractors, we have to leave it to them to pick them up. So I don't know the ins and outs. I know, absolutely, but it's just tell us and then we can help, please. On the stress testing of columns, when we looked at this, when this was first brought in, the cost for the equipment was phenomenal. The setup fees for the equipment was phenomenal. The computerized information they need. What I will do is I'll ask the guys to have another look at it and see if it does, it has reduced in cost and see if there is an opportunity there.
I think it has, because this year, even though we've only got 40, we were considering buying the equipment and training one of our staff to do it.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's more of a thank you to you for your delivery. Mine came across quite wrongly, so as rant, as I call it, frustration. I didn't think I was here just to observe. I was here to ask questions. So I apologise if it did come across as a rant, but you'll understand the frustration. There is an issue there, as quite rightly pointed out, and there it's just a daily occurrence. But I thank you for that.
Okay, shall we move on then, please? I think you've still got a little bit more on capital and programme.
Final bit, you'll be pleased to know, and I will be very quick, okay, so you don't need to listen to me anymore. It was just to cover that capital element, you know, that table at the end there. You see we've got a total of 243 million over the 4-year period, and how that's broken down is in table 5 for you. Major schemes, things like Zoxbridge, Melton, etc. Minor schemes, transport asset management, that actually means highway maintenance, you know. Waste management projects as well, they form the remainder of that. Funding comes from a number of sources: grant funding, developer section 106, contributions, and some corporate, some from LCC corporate, and that is broken down in table 6 for you where you get that. I've mentioned the structures fund that DFT have said that it's going to start actually from this coming April, but we don't know the details yet. That's £1 billion fund, so it certainly be something we'd be looking to see if we could pursue for some of our bigger works on those structures on the network. We just can't afford to replace, as I've explained earlier. Lastly, we've got there just some future capital requirements that are currently we're working up, and they're set out under paragraph 58. There's always more in the pipeline. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tilbury, do you have anything to add on to that?
No further, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, and Mr. McDonald first, please.
I've got a bit of mystery for you. Can you tell me who's filling in potholes in Woodby on Christmas Day? Badly.
I can, because I saw an email about that today or yesterday. We did emergency works on Christmas Day. It was us because we looked at it, it was reported to us, and it was a Cat 1 safety issue. We went out and we filled it in temporarily. It's still to be, there was a reason why it wasn't done permanently. It was, well, we had to do a quick safety work, but I think we have got something programmed to go and do the permanent repair on it. But basically it was a Cat 1 safety issue, so we filled it in Christmas Day.
Thank you.
Jolly good. Well, that was the recommendations to note the report and make the comments made. These will be presented to the Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of January and to the Cabinet in February. Okay, now we move on to the pedestrian crossing assessment and justification in Leicestershire. And it's back to, Jana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So just while I introduce this report, just in the interest of getting you all home for your tea, I am going to refer to crossings generally, but please be assured that when I use that, I'm talking about pedestrians, cyclists, and also equestrian crossings. But I'm just going to say one word instead of all of them as I talk through. Okay, so we wanted to bring you this report because actually, can a crossing go here? Why can't I have a crossing here? Is probably something that you're engaged in with your communities quite a lot, and a discussion that we have quite a lot with Leicestershire residents. And I think there is a little bit of a feeling that there's a lot of numbers floating around. You know, we talk about crossing numbers, vehicle speeds, that kind of thing. We put all of that into some sort of magical box and out comes a number, and then we use that. And perhaps that you would like to know a little bit more about how that works. So essentially, that is the purpose of this report, sort of take you through how that works, the national guidance that we're aligned to, so particularly the Transport Department for Transport's Traffic Signs Manual, Chapter 6, and also how we've kind of refined that approach to take on board further guidance over time, but also kind of have regard to what people are telling us about their community and the demand for crossing points as well. I will say this just as, and I think it's okay to say on behalf of Anne as well, ultimately, when we decide to make an intervention on the highway, we're really conscious that we, at some point, hopefully not anything bad happens, but if something does, we will have to justify that decision. So as a general principle, having a consistent set of factors we take into account and being able to explain that is really important in order to sort of maintain safety across the highway network. So in the case of crossings, we will look at this standard approach. We will take on board the special factors, which I'll mention in a moment. And there may be times where we can justify a different decision based on evidence. But what we can't do is kind of base it on how many people asked us, you know, what the sort of general view is, because we have to be able to point to that evidence-based assessment in the event that something was to happen. So just as a general kind of rule, that applies to a lot of interventions on the highway. Why you might think we seem a bit of a stickler for a process, but that's really important to us in our roles. So in line of that process, then we've, like I said, taken on board the national guidance. We're really understanding that the view around active travel is evolving. You know, there's need to encourage people or to support people to be able to choose to move around their place in an active way. And so what the report does is set out the crossing justification assessment, the full methodology, and Appendix A has sort of got an example of how that's worked through. I think there was a comment earlier that it took you back to your GCSE maths days. It does a bit. There's a formula in there to follow through. Paragraph 24 of the report kind of includes some of those additional things that people think we might not take into account, but we do, certainly in terms of severance to key services, proximity to schools, shops. And it may seem really odd to people in the community that we don't immediately provide crossings where some of those things might be. But if you take our other duties that we have as a highway authority, to ensure the efficient flow of traffic, for instance, if we were to put too many things in the network, then it wouldn't function in line with our other duties as well. So, you know, these things have to be kind of considered in the round. So also we've just pointed out, and there's an example at Appendix B, where rather than assess a single point, we have extended out that distance to look at demand across a kind of, the street as a whole or a longer area, so that we're taking a kind of rounded view of that demand for crossing. And there's an example in the report as well about where that approach has changed the outcome of assessments, and a crossing will now go into a location that under the previous guidance wouldn't have. So I suspect if, in all reality, you've all still got locations in your patch where you would say, Jana, I still want to cross in here, and I might still say it doesn't meet the criteria, but hopefully you can see why that is, and also there that we have broadened out the criteria to respond to your concerns and experience in your community as far as possible. So I think, Chair, if it's okay, given the time and also that people might have questions, I'll just leave it there and hand back to you.
Jolly good. Thank you very much. Mr. Tilbury?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one really from me. I mean, I welcome the changes. I think it's going to be more transparent. Obviously, want people to stay fit, want them walking around, and want safer streets. That's all I've got to add. Thanks, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much. Has there any other questions? Oh, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is relevant to what you're talking about. I smiled a lot there because 20 years ago, I remember my wife in Kirby Muxloe, when our children was young, getting a pedestrian crossing. She had to cut through a lot of red tape, which was necessary. And I appreciate what you're saying. She actually did manage to get that, which was fantastic. And it was just a crossing well. So times have changed. Roads have changed. The areas that I represent at the moment, there's quite a lot of traffic coming through the villages, the centres, and it's a question more. If you can help me with it, it's probably not the time to ask this, but I'm sure a lot of villages have experienced the same sort of thing. But what would you have to do to get a village to become a one-way system on the main street? Because to me, all the emails and complaints I'm getting about traffic, it seems that in particular Kirby Muxloe, that if we had a one-way system, because there is roads that can go around and the housing development and everyone cutting through, it's just a rat run, it would make it much safer and less more interesting for people cutting through villages. Just a question. Thank you.
Or we could definitely have a whole separate conversation on that one, I think. So, I'm happy to pick up your question about the specific location outside of this meeting. I'm pretty sure my colleague, you probably know Fiona, who looks after our traffic management team, probably looked at that specific example. I think there's a few things in there. I think where that approach would have the benefit of managing safety, supporting a good flow of traffic, that might be appropriate. And you've mentioned about making sure that there is an obvious route that would lend itself to a one-way system. I think where it might not necessarily always work out the way you think is you might make it more attractive. So you might end up with more traffic through your village when actually what you were trying to do was just manage the traffic that really needed to be in the village. But I think you've got to basically look at that area, do the assessments, think about, would it be easier for people to speed or other things like that, and make sure you've got a really good plan before you were to move to a one-way system. And then just to make life slightly more complicated, that would involve traffic regulation orders, which would mean public consultation and taking that on board as well. So it wouldn't be something that we could sort of look at overnight and do, but it's not something that we've got an in-principle problem with. It's more that those other factors, when you put them in, perhaps, we've got to make sure that the scheme would have the benefits that you would want it to do to put it in. But what I would say as well is that with the funding setup that we've mentioned through the MTFS, with the government sort of giving us that consolidated funding as well, if that was to be a suitable scheme to address, a suitably significant issue, we now can put that on future programmes and look to deliver that as well. But I wouldn't want to make any specific promises about any areas, and I'll do you a bit of a note on the Kirby Muxloe issue in particular.
Jolly good. Anybody else? Jolly good. Right, so we now move on to the presentation on the Melton Mowbray Distribution Road. And again, that's between Anne and Jana.
If it's okay, Chair, I'm going to drag Pat Clark into this one as well, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Let me just share my screen for you. she says. Just while I'm scrabbling around to do that, Chair, as well, I think it's just worth saying, isn't it, this builds on a visit that we offered to this panel out to the distributor road, and hopefully just share some information that some of you that made it out to site will have seen, but then also the next step since then as well. Hoping this is loading.
Yes, on that, Janet, thank you very much to everybody who organised that trip around the Melton Distributor Road. For those who went on it, it was very worthwhile, very informative, and just showed you what the huge construction project it was. So it was a very worthwhile site visit. So thank you very much.
There, great timing. Thank you. Yeah, and I think just on that point, I think that there is something about the physical scale of the scheme, just in terms of, Pat will probably come onto it in his section, of the scale of a project that we would normally do at the local authority. This is right at the big end of that, and there has been obviously some challenges associated with that. But let me just run through these fairly quickly, but please do stop me if anything I said doesn't make sense or skips over anything you wanted to know. So the North East Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, again, just to get you home, I'll just call it the MMDR. It's about 7 kilometres long. It's got 6 roundabouts that interact with the existing road network in Melton. We've diverted a whole river in order to construct it, the River Eye, and that just as well was a site of special scientific interest. The road itself is designed to distribute traffic around Melton in a more efficient manner, hopefully freeing up some of the congestion that you perhaps, if you're local, are already seeing in the town centre, but also you'll be aware of the housing growth as well to help provide for that. It's got cycle and walking facilities as well, and at the moment our total cost end to end is 134 million, although Pat and I are now in the process of kind of reviewing existing risk provision and things like that we've got in the scheme. So we expect to be finalising the figures over the next few months as the project comes to an end. And then you will get a kind of shutdown report, an evaluation report of the scheme, and that will go to Cabinet as well. So we'll be able to talk to you a bit more certainty about those final outturn position. I definitely, I know that managing construction projects isn't about superstition, but I just don't want to curse us with any bad weather or anything else by sort of saying that I think that figure will likely come down, if anything. But so we'll come back to that. So obviously we've talked about it supporting the housing in the area, improve the town centre and make it safer, both for people to walk around the town, but also to access around the distributor road as well. To make sure I'm moving slides here. Sorry about that. So again, just for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's just to set out the route there. There goes around the northeast of Melton, and in the local plan, I think, and some of your communities may talk to you about this again if you're local. We've also identified a future link to the south, which kind of completes that relief to the town centre. Helps manage HGVs and that sort of thing. So it is part of a wider plan, and we haven't forgotten about the southern sector. We're working with the development industry to provide that as well. But I think if there is one kind of hanging question for people, it's probably around that. So I think just to say, I mean, you'll be familiar with this in this area. We've talked to this committee and others about the impact of growth coming through local plans and the importance of kind of having a plan to deal with those impacts. This scheme very much came out of having a strategy to deal with the impact as a whole. And I think, without that, we would have seen several kind of implications that wouldn't be particularly positive for communities. And I know we're short on time, so I won't run through them, but they're up there on the slide for you. And I think just to highlight kind of what goes into a scheme like this, the options assessment, when we looked at that was 2015, so 11 years ago. And again, for those of you, I think that seems like a long time. I was out at the time trying to explain to communities, and they were saying, well, we've wanted one for 25 years. Don't come back now and tell me you're going to build a road. We'll believe it when we see it. There was already kind of an understanding of that sort of demand for more road infrastructure in the area. And the slide just takes you through the various stages we have to go through in order to get out on site, which we started in May 2023. And I think another thing we'll touch on today, but we will come back to in more detail when the scheme's complete, is the level of assurance and kind of peer reviews, things like that we've done to try and manage risks on the scheme. So first of all, the DFT have to check. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about whether the scheme does what it says on the tin type thing. So it goes through a lot of external scrutiny on there. We have the gateway processes to unlock the funding. But we also regularly report internally. We've had external consultants check things like our budget estimates, risk registers, whether we've got everything that we need to deliver. And we've done that throughout the life of the project. So I think we just to reassure you that we do take that up. And also there's been several opportunities for consultation with communities through this. So there was the original options assessment, there was the local planets examination. We also had to compulsory purchase land to deliver the scheme, and that is again really quite a thorough examination, quite rightly, because it's a very serious decision to make to compulsory purchase land to deliver a scheme. And again, the scheme and the work that we had done was scrutinised through all those processes to say that ultimately this is going to provide benefit in the area of Melton for a long time, and probably support growth of both housing and economic delivery for a generation's worth of growth. Luckily, because we have been doing stuff, we've got a lot of evidence of actual things happening on the ground that Pat's just going to talk you through in terms of construction and progress.
Thanks, Jana. And can I just echo the sentiments of everybody earlier on? For those that joined us on the day that we went out to Melton, thank you very much for giving us your time, and I'm hopefully you've seen what we're up to, the magnitude. But let me just take you through some of it. So the construction started, as Jana has already said, in May 23. We are looking at completing in spring 26. Weather at the moment is changeable, and we are looking at that constantly on a daily basis, but that's our intention at the moment. It started off with the demolishing of Sizenbury Farm and also the establishment on site of what we've got today as the compound. The project is one of the largest projects the County Council has undertaken for a very long time. It is a very, very complex civil engineering project. As Jana has said, it consists of 7.1 kilometres of road construction, 6 roundabouts, 4 bridges, 10 balancing ponds, 12 culverts. Once we've completed the project, there will be 60,000 metres of blacktop laid, square metres of blacktop laid, and 18,000 metres of cycle and footway provision. Just to give you some indication of the earthworks that have gone down there, the cut and fill, so where we've taken material from and moved it to, we've done that with 775,000 tonnes of material. We've also imported 225,000 tonnes of stone. Nearly 9,000 tonnes of concrete have gone into it, 1,700 tonnes of rebar. There is 661 piles in total on that job, and it's got 33,000 metres of drainage and 1,000 chambers. So I've got some work to do as we to look after all of that. Okay, do you want to move on, Jana? So the work is at an advanced stage. The majority of the structure is now, or the majority of the structures have now completed across the railway, across the River Rye, Salford Brook and Thorpe Brook. The new 6 roundabouts have all been completed and are open in sections to traffic. And we are on the final phase of completing the project. including landscaping and tree planting. The River Eye in particular is a triple SI site. We've relocated some of the River Eye itself, and that went really well. Got some great feedback from Natural England, who have been part of this all the way along the project, about what we've done and how we've done it. The new river channel and flood compensation area is performing really well. And in the recent storm that we've had, and with the water levels they're currently where they are, you can see the area is doing exactly what we expected it to do. The new railway bridge similarly was a large piece of engineering that was completed with really positive feedback from Network Rail, and that doesn't always come like that. The beams themselves were lifted in over December, over the Christmas period of 24. In the slides themselves, we've given you some time-lapse video. Please take an opportunity to have a look at them. It will just show you the installation of the large beams across the railway bridge and Scaldford Brook, and also some of the engineering challenges that we've had on the project. Several major challenges on site has contributed to the costs of the scheme actually going up. The project timeline includes exceptional weather events, Storm Babette, and you'll see a picture there of what happened in nationally with regards to Storm Babette. But in October 23, Leicestershire had one of its wettest days that it's ever had. We had flooding on the River Eye, so that affected the construction of the new bridge. We had a lot of challenge managing statutory undertakers to make sure they delivered to programme. Ground conditions were also extremely challenging. Whilst the project was going on, at the railway bridge, we found an area that was probably the size of a football pitch that needed additional support into that area before we could build the bridge. Needed more piles on it. So you're constantly looking at things like that. One of the piles, or some of the piles that's supporting the railway bridge, are 25 metres long into the ground. And we needed one of the largest piling rigs in Europe to come to Leicestershire to deliver that project for us. Thanks, Jim. The team were always looking at innovative ways of delivering the project, delivering it more safely, more efficiently, and more as a sustainable project going forward. One example of this is what we've popped up there on the picture. That picture there is at Melton, at the compound, and it is a foam bitumen plant. So what we've been able to do is to use the horizons from the project itself that had elements of coal tar in it, bring them back to the compound, reconstitute them, and put them back out on the network again, treated. And we were able to use horizons right the way across Leicestershire because of the way we done it. All the planings we had in Leicestershire were brought over there, reconstituted, and put back in the base course. So in total, the on-site batching saved over 50,000 miles of heavy goods vehicles in Leicestershire. Cost saving of about 400,000 and a CO2 saving of 2,300 tonnes of CO2 emissions. But that was one example of what we're trying to do over at Melton. Okay, Jana.
Back to me. Thank you, Pat. I think just looking then at next steps. So you'd think, wouldn't you, that the bridge building and the diversion of River Eye would be the most difficult part of the scheme, but I'm not sure if naming the road might be one of the trickiest parts that we come to. So just thanks to our colleagues at Melton as well. So Melton Borough Council are the road naming authority as the planning authority, or street naming authority, I should say. What we've what we had planned to do, and I think sort of going back before perhaps some of you were aware of the scheme or were certainly on the scrutiny committee, was to involve the community in naming the road. They've been locally, put up with the road work, so hopefully they're going to benefit from it. But just to sort of to make sure that people can have a say in that. So the idea is to put a shortlist together that will be put out to the public vote, sort of lining up and building into opening the road in spring 2026. Now we've had to offer some names up because we can't have a roadie face type situation, and there are quite strict criteria around naming a road. So we've been working with the people responsible for that to make sure that things are appropriate. And like I say, we will then sort of announce that and set up all the signing and things to reflect it. So I was hoping to be in a position to let you know what the shortlists were and things like that, but the final checks are still ongoing, so we'll progress that for you, but just to let you know that is in hand. As Pat said, we had some challenges around budget and finance on capital schemes. And I think without wanting to underplay the kind of importance of the budget and capital programme management, local authorities up and down the country have had a really challenging time of delivering projects, national highways, things like COVID, cost of steel and materials following sort of world conflicts and things like that have really impacted costs over the time that we've been planning for and building the scheme, as well as some of the things that Pat mentioned. So we've set out the funding there. So, is £50 million thereabouts from the Department for Transport, who will also be interested in moving towards opening the road and working with us on that. From Leicestershire County Council have provided significant funding, about around the same sort of figure, and we've also got funding coming in from private developers. So it's been a complex structure to fund that I think again goes to show you why some of the issues around local plans going forward now that we're keen to see funding mechanisms to deliver infrastructure included in those plans as well. When we made the decision to deliver the road, that was a really significant decision. We take a report to Cabinet with the kind of pros and cons of doing that, thought about the risk. We did allocate a contingency because corporately and also at a national level, there's still a recognition that although you're ready to go into contract for a scheme, there's still a level of uncertainty and unknowns, and 10% contingency was put in there for those kind of unknowns at the point. So that left us with a scheme budget of 127.2 million. The current forecast, last time we reported through the formal process last period was 134.6. Like I say, we won't make any guarantees, but we are seeing the outturn forecast coming downwards from that position, but we will report that as a final figure through the process that we've talked about as well. So it won't surprise you to know that, again, I could probably take you for a whole day out on lessons learnt when you've done a massive project the way we have. And I should emphasise, I have a natural sort of implication to start talking about the lessons learnt from things that we would do differently. But there are quite a few things on this scheme that I think we would absolutely carry forward into future projects as well. And when we bring that more detailed report evaluating the scheme, we will set those out. But yeah, so challenges, Pat mentioned sort of the ones that have implemented the finances around archaeology, how we interact with statutory undertakers, those type of things would definitely be in there. Also how we structure the project, work with partners, how we engage with communities, manage roadworks. There's a lot in there that we can take into future projects as well. And that will be available for you as we sort of finalise the scheme. So we'll be liaising with comms. You'll get detailed arrangements of things that are happening around opening the scheme. We're really looking to make the most of it as well in terms of sharing knowledge for things like our graduates here and our colleagues in the industry. And like I say, we've been, I'll be honest, we've deliberately said Easter because, as Pat mentioned, we've had some really wet weather in the last few months, and we just need to make sure that we're going to get enough dry spell in the run up to Easter on the exact date to make sure that when we finalise the last bits of works, we've got to lay some material on the footways, for instance. If we did that now, we'd only be going back and fixing it in a couple of months. So we're just going to make sure we've got the right conditions, which is why we we've just been a little bit vague with that date, but Easter is where we're aiming. And members will be kept informed of the progress of that as we go through. So we've got some contact details there for you if you've got any more questions. And you'll be relieved to know, Chair, that the rest of the presentation is really just to demonstrate that progress, the sort of before and after or interim pictures. So I won't take you through them. I'll perhaps just click through them now while we take any questions, if that's all right with you. Oh, sorry, Anne.
Sorry, Chair, just being opportune. I just wanted to say, just as a bit of a roundup there, I hope you'll appreciate it there. This has been 10 years in the making. And in this country, that's kind of average for a major project. You've got, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of development and trying to get the money and the funding for it, and then 3 years on site anyway. So, you're at a kind of 10-year in the making. I think as Jan and Pat have taken you through, when we do get in site there, despite all the planning and everything and your risk and your contingency and all that, you always hit something else on a project of this scale. As Pat said, this is the biggest ever project that we as Leicestershire have ever done. We got things like flooding, Storm Babette, etc. That winter was dreadful in terms of flooding, and probably happened at the worst time in terms of where we were on the construction to have maximum impact, negative impact on it. We had far more archaeology than we'd anticipated. There was something like 25 hectares under archaeology in the end of it. We had utilities company, because they have to come in and get their utilities right, etc., having issues with their utilities and delaying our programme. There was a number of real, and Pat mentioned we called it the soft spot, the ground conditions where we had to do a lot of extra piling. You hear soft spot, you think it's, a minor bit. Size of a football, exactly where we were going to put the takeoff for the bridge over the railway. So in dealing with all that, managing it, keeping it on the programme and managing those costs down with those bigger world events that were alluded to, Jana and Pat taking this forward, this scheme have done a brilliant job. I just wanted to say, I hope if you can just take 5 minutes, look at some of those video links if you've not been out there, because it's not a visible scheme. Even if you're out and about Melton, the only bits you see are from the kind of roundabouts when it interacts. There's loads of major civil engineering works that are really phenomenal that have gone on that it's just not been visible to the public or to anybody. If you just take a few minutes to have a look at those, just shows you the scale, the amount of work that we have undertaken to put this on the ground. It just can't be, it's pretty phenomenal. And I just really have to thank and acknowledge the work of Jana and Pat and all our teams and the private sector partners we've got delivering it for us in getting us to this point, because we really are there. We're in the home straight, and it is a phenomenal job. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to add that.
Well, thank you for that presentation. It was very impressive. I personally was incredibly impressed with the fact that it was so close to budget. I see so many of the central government projects go way over. And with all the problems you've had, I personally would like to commend you all for keeping it well within budget. Now, I have first Mr. O'Shea and then Mr. Ludgrove.
Thank you, Chair. I personally would like to thank Pat and Jana and the whole team, really, because it's been one massive engineering project, and having been there at the start looking through it, you've done an absolutely wonderful job, and keeping it within the confines of the budget that you have done. I think you've done an amazing job, really. The work and the engineering that's gone into that is massive, and all credit to the team and to Galliford for the way that you've all worked as a team together to get this through, and it's going to be a real benefit for the commuters and around Melton. So well done to the whole team. Thank you.
Mr. Ludgrove.
Thank you, Chairman. Excellent report, Jana. Thank you very much indeed. A couple of things. I think you're too modest in the way you managed the budget, because on the day when we went round, it was the recycling of the tarmac planings, but during the day you identified, you didn't just say I have a plan and here we're going to just do what we've done by the plan. You found out cost savings as you were going along and changed your plans, which managed to keep the budget under control, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Lessons learned definitely, and also I think the accident rate was minimal or non-existent, and so that's obviously Galliford Try were an excellent company to choose and work with, and they did everything health and safety wise, which is very commendable. I think road base is the top one on Facebook at the moment. It's just just recently been going around. But something I did mention on the day, and I don't know whether it's a possibility or not. If it was called Pork Pie Way from one end to the other, and it's 7.1 kilometres, that may or may not be confusing from one person at one end to the person at the other end. And I did suggest, and it may be something we look at Melton. I think there's 4 or 5 sections of road, and whether they could be called something different each part instead of Pork Pie Way for the whole 7.1 kilometres. That's just something. Yeah.
So were you thinking of something like trust?
No, but there have been 8 or 10 suggestions, proposals put forward, and there may be some come from the public in Melton as well. So I don't know whether something goes through Melton Borough Council General, or whether we can look at that. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, Chair. Is it okay to respond to that? Apologies. Yeah, just to say, absolutely. You did mention on the day, and one of the things I don't know if I think when we took the advice, it probably wouldn't be every section between the roundabouts, but certainly perhaps looking at north and then east or things like that. Taking again advice from street naming authorities, that is being considered as well. And you're absolutely right. Because Melton, working in collaboration with us have been very sort of, they didn't have to involve us in that process, but are working in partnership to do so. They put some suggestions forward. There's some from the public, and we'll, but like you say, have to go through the strict checks, make sure it wouldn't confuse the emergency services, for instance, if they were called somewhere by a duplicate roads and that sort of thing. So there's a process to go through, which we'll come back to, and then the vote will be on a set list that is approved, and it will go through both authorities before that goes out as well.
Jolly good. My apologies, Mr. Tilby. I should have come to you first.
Disgusted, Chair. I just want to echo everyone's points. I just like to point out that when I was on site and speak to the project managers, I was absolutely astounded that we're so close to budget, because if you think about what's happened in the last 10 years, we had the massive inflation on materials during lockdown, and then you had the Ukraine war a few years ago. And he was saying some of the material prices have gone up like 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 60%. So to stay this close in budget is commendable to all those involved. And I will say that it's just been a fantastic achievement by LCC, long before my time, I have to say. But great work, everyone. Put my flood and environment hat on. The project manager showed me around the ponds and the flood alleviation schemes done on the site. And I have to say they're very, very positive, and it will also incorporate biodiversity as well. So on that front as well, another great positive step, and that's all I've got to say. Thank you ever so much, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Tilbury. So that was the presentation, and it's up to date, and its committee's comments will be recorded in the minutes. So we can now move on to healthy streets. And now that Anne has had a bit of a rest for her voice, she and Jana are going to take on this one. Oh, jolly good, Jana.
Thank you, Chair. She has difficulty keeping me quiet all the time. So Healthy Streets, we're really pleased to introduce this report to you, which again really is about providing a little bit more of transparency about the way we're going to be thinking about our schemes going forward. So Healthy Streets, so the report will set out what Healthy Streets might mean in practice and how it kind of aligns to our aims and what's perhaps happening where we've learned from best practice in other areas of the country as well. So it's really a framework based on evidence, thinking about how people use space and feel about moving around their space, that kind of influences the way we can make use of our highway areas, our streets, our public realm, to encourage more people to move around and have better health and be better connected with the facilities they need. So the approach obviously has benefits, including supporting that health, but also economic activity, improving health and well-being, reducing congestion, enhancing the environment that we're in. And essentially, like we say, what it's about is kind of creating spaces that people want to spend time in. So it might be about putting a bench somewhere on a longer route, services perhaps if people would find it difficult to make the whole journey. Perhaps there's no shade currently where you might want to walk down a route, and it would make it much more attractive to do that. The things like if you're walking your kids to school and you having to dodge around 3 different signs that over time have kind of emerged in the middle of the footway or gone somewhere else, and actually it would be a much smoother, less stressful journey if those places were a bit more legible. So as we come around to look at schemes that we're delivering, we will try and apply that framework and make some of them could be really quite low cost or even cost neutral decisions in design when we look at places with that in mind. And if we work with partners such as the district councils on schemes as well, there's the opportunity to do that through the public realm. So again, I'll won't sort of go into too much detail that's already set out in the report, but I'm really happy to answer questions. Really what we're setting out there is we're looking to embed Healthy Streets as kind of a business as usual core part of how we look at our programme. And as Anne's taken you through, there's quite a significant programme. So it will take us, I think, a bit of time to become really good and sort of consistent in how we do that, but we are committed to doing that, and hopefully it will help create sort of safer, healthier and more welcoming environments for our community in Leicestershire. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's all right for you.
Yes, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Is there anybody? Oh, Dr. Bloxham.
Chairman, thanks. This seems like a really good scheme, and it's good that the south of Leicester's already got one of these set up. So I've been taking a look at that. We're really lucky in Blaby and Glenparva and Whetstone and Carrotsthorpe with all the paths and things that we've got. Although one of the future things seems to go through my house, which is a bit concerning. So, I'll leave the doors open when people are coming through. A couple of questions. I get that we don't manage the canal footpath, but it seems like presumably it's been taken into account when the planning's happening, because it goes through Wigston and Blaby and Whetstone and Glenparva, so a huge chunk of that and all these other paths are connected to the canal footpath. So the way people are going to be using it, the network, it's going to be included. So just looking at the one I'm looking at, it just seems like that should be on there somewhere. It should be taken into account so that we get a better idea of where the paths actually go. Otherwise, it kind of looks a bit illogical in places. And likewise, I think there's big district parks as well. And I think in the way people use the network, there's a bit here where Blaby to County-Thorpe, our path is kind of a footpath at the side of the road, whereas someone going out for a nice walk would probably use the paths that go through the wildlife area. And then finally, again, really good. Are there specific people we can talk to with suggestions and things about this? That would be quite useful to know, to who's keeping an eye on our particular LCWIP. Thanks.
Yeah, so certainly, like you say, the LC WIP, so you're getting into our acronym lingo, so local cycling, walking infrastructure plans would be one of the key places we would look to sort of implement the Healthy Streets stuff and do that. So probably it might be worth if I circulate like a contact details with the minute so you can see that. But yeah, certainly get in touch with our teams, and we're really keen. We've just had the big travel survey as well that's recently closed, and there was 2 elements to that. One was kind of, do you like our policies, which I'll be honest, it's not for everyone, is it? Some people do like to read our policies, but other people are much more interested in, this is my street, I'd like you to make this footpath wider or whatever. So there was a map element to that big travel survey as well, and people could select areas and make suggestions. So I suspect that, part of that survey will go into those, or, we will have got quite a few suggestions through there as well. So I'll circulate the contact details. That map element of the big travel survey is going to remain available, so people can continue to give us suggestions about areas they'd like to see those improvements. That's one way to do that. And if you want more detail about your specific area with the LC WIPs, I'll get the officer to contact you and have a good chat about that as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Tilbury, I should have come to you again first. I do apologise.
Besmirching me, Chair. No, I think to be fair, Councillor Bloxham, that's one of the questions I was going to, so I'm all covered. Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to make any comment or question on that? Good. Well, as I said, so a report which will be sent on, and comments will be made. Just leaves us now to date of next meeting, which I have down here as the 5th of March. Yes, okay. And there being no other business and no urgent business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much indeed.